I was still talking when she did something I'll never forget. She picked up her phone, not to check the time, not to silence a notification. She picked it up to step out of the conversation. With this weirdly calm, almost polite look, like I was rambling about something insignificant, she said, "Hold on a second." A second. Like I was a pop-up. Like our relationship was just a browser tab she could pause. Then she tapped a name, put the phone to her ear, and called her friends. Right there, in front of me. In the middle of the argument. Not after, not, "I'll talk to you later." No, during. And I swear, her tone changed in half a breath. With me, she was tense and sharp. With them, suddenly light. That easy, conspiratorial laugh that tells you everything without saying it. "Girls, one sec. I'm arguing with him." Like I was content, like my side of the story was just the trailer, and the real episode was the one with an audience. I stood there with my sentence stuck in my throat, and she'd already moved on, already recruiting a panel. And in that moment, it hit me with this cold, crystal-clear feeling. This wasn't a fight between two people who care about each other anymore. This was a vote, a courtroom she set up on the spot, with me as the defendant and her friends as the judges. And the worst part wasn't even the call. It was what I heard right after, the one line that made me realize our private life wasn't private anymore. I'm 28. I work a normal, boring job that keeps me glued to a screen all day, and by the time I get home, my brain is usually fried in that quiet, end-of-day way. She's 26, more social than I'll ever be. The kind of person who can turn a quick coffee into a 3-hour catch-up with 3 different friends and still have energy afterward. We'd been together a little over 2 years when all of this happened. Long enough that we weren't in the cute honeymoon phase anymore, but not so long that things were completely cemented either. Long enough to have routines. Long enough to have patterns. Most weeknights looked the same. I'd get off work, pick up something quick for dinner, and we'd end up on the couch with a show playing in the background. Sometimes we actually watched it. Sometimes it was just noise while she scrolled, sending voice notes and reacting to whatever was happening in her group chats. She always had a group chat going. Always. There was one for her friends from college, one for her coworkers, one for the girls she'd known forever. I knew the names, I knew the inside jokes, I knew the rhythm of her phone lighting up. It was part of her life, and I wasn't trying to take that away. And in the beginning, I didn't even think twice about it. It was kind of cute, honestly. She was connected. She had people. She didn't keep everything bottled up. Meanwhile, I'm the opposite. I'm not a big, let me tell 10 people about this guy. I'm more like, if something's wrong, I want to look the person in the eye and fix it. I don't like unresolved tension sitting in the room like a third person. I'm direct, probably too direct sometimes. If I'm upset, you'll know. If something's bothering me, I'd rather have an uncomfortable 10-minute conversation than drag it out for 3 days. That's always been my thing. Face-to-face, real-time, deal with it. Not because I'm some emotional genius, but because I hate the feeling of fake peace. I hate that we're fine tone when you can tell you're not fine. I'd rather argue honestly than smile dishonestly. She wasn't like that. She avoided confrontation the way some people avoid bad weather. If she could reroute around it, she would. If she could soften it, joke it away, or push it to later, she did. And if she couldn't avoid it, she'd look for backup. Not in an aggressive way at first. More like she needed someone to tell her she wasn't crazy, that she wasn't the bad guy, that her feelings were valid. She cared a lot about how things looked. She cared about being seen as reasonable, as the good one, as someone who handled things the right way. She hated the idea that she might be wrong, or that she might be unfair. Not because she was evil, because she was terrified of being judged. And the quickest way to avoid judgment is to get ahead of it. So she'd talk. She'd talk to her friends. She'd talk to them about everything. The little annoyances, the arguments, the miscommunications, the "you won't believe what he said" moments. Again, at first I didn't see it as a threat. People vent. People need support. I get it. I'm not saying nobody should ever talk to their friends about their relationship. But over time, I started to notice something that bothered me, and I couldn't unsee it once I saw it. Whenever we had an issue, it didn't stay between us. If we argued, it wasn't just me and her in that room. It was me, her, and the invisible audience behind her phone. It was like I was speaking to her, but she was already preparing a version of the story for someone else. Like she couldn't sit in the discomfort of, "we don't agree yet," because she needed a verdict, she needed a ruling, she needed someone to say, "you're right, he's wrong." Meanwhile, my assumption, the way I was wired, was simple. If we have a problem, we talk about it. We sit down, we clear it up, we move forward. That was the unspoken contract in my head. Not romantic, not dramatic, just adult. Two people, one issue, solve it. Her contract was different. Hers was, if there's a problem, you consult the counsel. You gather opinions. You collect evidence. You make sure you're not alone in your feelings. You make sure you have reinforcements before you walk back into the room. And at first, it was subtle, a little comment here and there. Yeah, I told the girls about that. They agree with me. Or she'd say something like, my friends think you're being kind of harsh. Not I think, not I feel. My friends think. It would happen after fights sometimes. We'd have this tense conversation. I'd think we were slowly getting somewhere. And then she'd disappear into the bathroom for 15 minutes with her phone. When she came back, she'd be colder, more confident, like she'd downloaded a new script. She'd suddenly have the perfect phrases. She'd use words she never used before. You're being manipulative. You're invalidating me. This is toxic. Sometimes it felt like the fight wasn't even ours anymore. It felt like I was arguing with a crowd, but the crowd was speaking through her mouth. And don't get me wrong, sometimes I deserve criticism. I'm not pretending I'm the perfect boyfriend who never messes up. I can be blunt. I can be stubborn. I can get frustrated and shut down when I feel like I'm not being heard. I'm human. But what started to bother me wasn't the feedback, it was the dynamic, the way every conflict became a performance. Because there's a difference between talking to your friends for support and turning your relationship into a group project. When you're in a relationship, you're supposed to feel like your partner is on your team, even when you're mad at each other, even when you disagree, even when you're calling each other out. The baseline should still be, we're in this together. It's me and you versus the problem. With her, it started to feel like it was me versus her and everybody she texted. And that changed the temperature of everything. It made me hesitate before bringing things up. It made me wonder, if I say this, am I saying it to her or am I saying it to 10 people? It made me feel exposed in a way I didn't know how to explain without sounding dramatic. Because I wasn't scared of her friends. I wasn't intimidated by them. I just didn't want my private moments turned into content. I didn't want my flaws, my confusion, my raw emotions packaged into a story for entertainment and validation. I'm the type of guy who believes some things should stay between two people, not because I want secrets, not because I want to control anyone, because intimacy matters. Privacy matters. The messy middle of a relationship, those awkward, painful conversations where you're trying to understand each other, those aren't meant for a jury. But her world didn't work like that. Her world was social. Her world was feedback. Her world was constant connection. And I think, deep down, she didn't even realize how much power that gave her. Because if you can walk into every argument already backed by a group, you're never really vulnerable. You're never really risking being wrong. You're never risking being alone with your own thoughts. You always have somewhere to run for a quick hit of certainty. And I didn't notice how far it had gone until the day she did it right in front of me. That's why it hurt so much. It wasn't just one rude moment. It was the moment that made everything click. All the little comments, all the "my friend said" lines, all the times she disappeared mid-argument and came back with her armor on. I thought our rule, our unspoken agreement, was when something's wrong, we talk. She thought the rule was, when something's wrong, you call the audience. And once you realize you're not in a private conversation anymore, you start to wonder if you ever were. It didn't start with her calling her friends in the middle of a fight. If it had started that way, I would have seen it for what it was immediately. It would have been too obvious, too blatant. You don't ignore something that loud. What happened was worse, because it was gradual. It was little things. Small, almost harmless moments that added up until they weren't harmless anymore. At the time, I kept telling myself it was normal. People vent. People need their friends. It's fine. I'd shrug it off, swallow the discomfort, and keep trying to be the secure boyfriend who doesn't get weird about it. But there were signs, and if I'm honest, they were there for a while. The first thing I noticed was what happened after arguments. We'd have a fight. Nothing crazy, just a tense back and forth. And I'd think, okay, we got it out. We didn't solve it, but we at least said the truth. There was that fragile moment right after, where you're both quiet, both raw, and you either come together or you drift. With us, she would drift into her phone. She'd go to the bathroom or step onto the balcony, and I'd hear the familiar sound, her voice getting softer, warmer, like she was talking to someone who could never disappoint her. Sometimes I'd hear the little laugh, like she was already turning the argument into something lighter than it felt inside the room. Then she'd come back 20 minutes later with a completely different energy, more composed, more confident, almost rehearsed. And that's the part that started to mess with my head. because I wasn't walking out of those arguments feeling understood. I was walking out feeling like I'd just presented my case to someone who was about to consult a panel of judges. And when she came back, it didn't feel like we were continuing a conversation. It felt like she was delivering a decision. She'd say things like, "Okay, so I talked to the girls." Not, "I thought about it," not, "I see your point." It was always framed like she'd gone to get a ruling. And the ruling always had this tone of authority, like it was more legitimate because it came from outside the relationship. Like her feelings needed to be stamped and approved by other people before they were real. And maybe that's what she needed emotionally, but to me it felt like I was being outnumbered in my own relationship. Sometimes the verdict was subtle. She'd come back and suddenly the argument wasn't about what we were actually talking about. It was about my character. Do you realize how controlling that sounds? Or, that's actually a really toxic thing to say. Words she didn't usually use. Words that felt imported. Like someone else had handed her a toolkit and she was trying it out on me. And I'm not saying those words are never valid. I'm saying it was the way they appeared right after she'd been on her phone for 15 minutes. The timing was never a coincidence. It felt like she was building a case against me, not trying to understand me. The second sign was her favorite phrase. It started as a joke, then became a habit. The girls say, the girls think. The girls agree that. She'd drop it casually like it wasn't a big deal, like she was just sharing an interesting opinion. But over time, it turned into a weapon that was almost impossible to argue with. Because how do you respond to a crowd you can't even hear? If I disagreed with her, I wasn't just disagreeing with her. I was disagreeing with the girls. And suddenly, it wasn't my word against hers. It was my word against a whole group chat. It created this weird pressure to just shut up and take it. Because anytime I defended myself, it sounded like I was attacking her friends. And I didn't want to be that guy. I didn't want to be the boyfriend who doesn't let her have friends. I didn't want to be insecure or possessive. So I'd back off. I'd soften my words. I'd compromise faster than I should have. And she learned something from that, even if she didn't realize it. If you bring in an outside opinion, I fold. The third sign was something that hit me in a completely different way. Screenshots. The first time I noticed it, it wasn't even during a fight. We were lying in bed, half watching something, and she was scrolling and laughing to herself. I asked what was funny, and she said, nothing. But she was smiling that smile people have when they're sharing something with someone else. Then I saw my name on her screen. Not in a flattering way. Not, look what he said, he's so sweet. It was a screenshot of a text I'd sent her earlier. Something personal, something honest, something that I thought was just between us. She quickly locked her phone when she saw me look, but it was too late. I'd seen enough to know what it was. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I asked her straight up, as calm as I could. Did you just screenshot my message? She laughed like I was being dramatic. Yeah, it was just funny. I sent it to the group chat. And the way she said it, so casual, like it didn't matter, made my stomach drop. Because I didn't send that message to her in the group chat. I sent it to her. I wasn't performing. I wasn't trying to be entertaining. I was being real. And she turned it into a screenshot like it was a meme. When I said it bothered me, she rolled her eyes and hit me with the same logic she always used. It's not that deep. Or they don't even know you like that. Or it's just the girls. Just the girls. Like that made it okay. After that, I started noticing how often she did it. Not always about me, but enough that it stayed in my mind. It made me feel like anything I said could end up being shown to other people, stripped of context, turned into a joke, turned into a "can you believe this" moment. And that leads to the fourth sign, the one that's harder to describe, but probably the most important. I started to feel evaluated more than listened to. Like I wasn't being heard as a person, I was being graded as a boyfriend. Like my words weren't being received, they were being scored. And her reactions started to make sense in that framework. If I apologized, it wasn't just about fixing things. It was about whether I'd said the right line. If I tried to explain myself, it wasn't about understanding. It was about whether my explanation would pass the test. I felt like I was constantly being measured against some invisible standard that wasn't ours. It was hers and her friends combined. And the problem with that dynamic is simple. You can't be vulnerable when you're being judged. You can't admit you're wrong without wondering how it's going to be retold. You can't say "this hurt me" without worrying it'll be turned into a screenshot, a voice note, a punchline. You start editing yourself. You start choosing safer words. You start shutting down, not because you don't care, but because you don't feel safe. At the time, I kept excusing it. I called it venting. I told myself she was just close with her friends. I told myself, this is modern dating. This is how people are. But looking back, I can say it clearly now. It wasn't just venting. It was already a power dynamic. Every time she ran to her friends right after a fight, she was stacking the room in her favor. Every time she dropped the girls say, she was bringing a crowd into our private space. Every time she screenshot something personal, she was teaching me that intimacy with her came with an audience. And once there's an audience, it stops being a relationship and starts being a performance. I just didn't realize how far it had gone until the day she did it while I was still talking. It didn't start with her calling her friends in the middle of a fight. If it had started like that, I would have recognized it instantly as disrespect. It would have been too obvious to ignore. What happened was quieter, slower. It came in small pieces, little moments that didn't look like a problem on their own, but together built a pattern that I kept excusing because I didn't want to be that boyfriend. The insecure one, the controlling one, the guy who acts weird about his girlfriend having friends. So I told myself it was normal. People vent, people talk, people need support. But there were early signs that what she was doing wasn't just venting, it was something else. And the scary part is how easy it was to miss, because it always came wrapped in a casual tone, like I was the one making it serious. The first sign showed up right after arguments. We'd fight over something small, plans changing last minute, a comment that landed wrong, me feeling dismissed, her feeling criticized, and I'd think we were at least still in the conversation. Even if we were tense, even if neither of us was ready to apologize, we were still in it together. That's what I believed conflict was supposed to be: messy, uncomfortable, but private. Two people working through their own misunderstanding. With her, the moment things got uncomfortable, the room would go quiet, and then she'd drift into her phone like it was an escape hatch. Sometimes it was the bathroom, sometimes it was the balcony. Sometimes she'd just roll over on the couch and start typing with her back half turned to me. And you could actually feel the shift. She'd stop being present with me and start being present somewhere else. Her face would change, her posture would change, like she was stepping into a different world that didn't require her to sit in uncertainty. Then she'd come back. And she wouldn't come back softer, she wouldn't come back curious, she came back certain, like she'd just had a meeting. And she'd hit me with it in this calm, rehearsed way. Okay, so I'd talk to the girls. Not, I've been thinking, not, I see what you meant. Not, can we try again? It was always framed like she'd gone out and consulted a panel, and now she was returning with the official decision. And it wasn't just the words, it was the vibe. It felt like she wasn't continuing a conversation, she was delivering a verdict. Like the argument had moved into another room, been discussed without me, and now I was being informed of the result. That alone would have been enough to make me uncomfortable, but the second sign was even more obvious once it became a habit, her favorite phrase. The girls say, the girls think. The girls agree that. At first it sounded harmless, like she was just sharing what her friends thought. But over time it started landing differently, because it wasn't just an opinion, it was pressure. If I disagreed with her, I wasn't just disagreeing with her, I was disagreeing with an entire group chat. And you can't argue with a group chat, because you can't see their faces, you can't hear their tone, you can't respond in real time. You can only sit there while your partner translates a crowd into a single line that automatically favors her. The weirdest part is how it changes you. I started editing myself. Not consciously at first, but in that subtle way where you pause before saying what you really mean, because you're picturing how it's going to be repeated. You start choosing your words like you're writing something that might be read by strangers. You stop speaking freely and start speaking defensively. And every time she pulled the girls say card, it made me hesitate even more, because if I pushed back too hard, I could already see the next argument forming, why are you attacking my friends? Or why do you care what they think? Or you're trying to isolate me. So instead of arguing, I'd soften. I'd compromise too quickly. I'd swallow things I should have said out loud. And I don't think she even realized the power they gave her, how much weight outside voices carry when they're being used mid-conflict. The third sign hit in a more personal way, screenshots. The first time I noticed, it was almost accidental. We were on the couch, half watching a show, and she was laughing into her phone. Not the kind of laugh you do at a funny video, more like that private, smug laugh people do when they're sharing something with someone else. I asked, "What's so funny?" She shrugged, "Nothing." But I caught a glimpse of the screen and I saw my name. A message from me, a text I'd sent earlier that day. Something honest, something private, nothing dramatic, just me being real with my girlfriend. And before she could lock her phone, I saw the little preview that told me exactly what was happening. She was sending it to someone else. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I asked straight up, keeping my tone as calm as I could. Did you just screenshot what I said? She looked at me like I was being ridiculous. Yeah, it was funny. I sent it to the girls. The way she said it, so casual, like it didn't even register as a boundary, made my stomach drop. Because in my head, there's a difference between venting and broadcasting, a difference between saying, I'm upset, and turning your partner's words into content. I didn't send that message to entertain a group chat. I sent it because I trusted her. When I told her it bothered me, she did what she always did when I tried to draw a line. She minimized it. It's not that deep. They don't even know you like that. It's just the girls. Just the girls. Like, it couldn't possibly matter because it was framed as harmless. Like, privacy only counts if you're sharing it with men, or strangers, or the internet. But I wasn't worried about who they were. I was bothered by what it meant. That my vulnerability wasn't safe with her. After that, I started noticing more little moments that gave me the same feeling. She'd read something I texted and smirk, thumb hovering like she was deciding if it was shareable. She'd joke with her friends right in front of me about things that should have stayed between us. And even when it wasn't mean, it still changed the air. It made me feel exposed. Which brings me to the fourth sign, the one that's hardest to explain, but probably the most damaging. I started feeling evaluated more than listened to. Like I wasn't a person she was trying to understand. I was a boyfriend being graded. When I tried to explain myself, she didn't respond like someone trying to hear my perspective. She responded like someone deciding whether my answer was acceptable. When I apologized, it didn't feel like we were reconnecting. It felt like I was saying the correct line to get the argument to end. And when I expressed something vulnerable that hurt, I felt dismissed. I'm not okay with that. There was always this sense that it would be reviewed, discussed, and judged somewhere else. The problem with being judged is you stop being honest. You stop taking emotional risks. You stop admitting uncertainty. You stop saying, maybe I'm wrong. Because you know that won't be used tenderly. It'll be used as evidence. You stop opening up because you don't know if what you say is going to stay in the room or end up as a voice note with 3 laughing reactions and a, girl, he's insane. And here's the part one hate admitting. I kept calling it venting because I didn't want to face what it actually was. I told myself she was just close with her friends. I told myself this was modern dating. I told myself it was healthier than bottling things up. I tried to be understanding, tried to be cool about it, because I loved her and I didn't want to create a bigger problem. But looking back, it's clear. It wasn't just venting, it was already a power dynamic. Every time she left an argument to send voice notes and came back with a decision, she wasn't resolving conflict, she was outsourcing it. Every time she said, the girls say you, she was bringing a crowd into a conversation that should have been between 2 people. Every time she screenshot something private for laughs, she was teaching me that intimacy with her came with an audience. And once there's an audience, the relationship stops being a relationship. It becomes a performance. At the time, I called it blowing off steam. In reality, it was already a control dynamic, and I just didn't realize how far it had gone until the day she did it while I was still talking. It happened on a weeknight, the kind where the hours blur together and you don't realize how tired you are until you finally stop moving. I got home later than usual because my boss decided at the last second that something needed to be fixed tonight. You know that feeling, when you're already mentally halfway home, already imagining taking your shoes off, and then someone drops a problem in your lap like it's nothing. By the time I walked into our apartment, my shoulders were tight, my head was buzzing, and I had that dry, annoyed fatigue that makes you a little less patient than you should be. The apartment was dim, except for the TV glow. She was on the couch, legs tucked under her, phone in her hand like it was an extension of her body. She looked up and smiled, but it was distracted, like her eyes were on me and her attention was on 10 other people. Hey, she said, you're late. Yeah, I said, dropping my keys into the bowl by the door. Work blew up. I went into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and stared at it like I was going to find peace inside. I could hear her phone chiming behind me, that familiar rhythm that used to be background noise and now made my jaw tighten. I tried to keep the night normal. I really did. I made something quick. Eggs, toast, whatever was easy. She barely touched her food. Every few seconds her screen lit up and her thumb did that automatic little swipe like she couldn't stand the idea of missing anything. At some point, she laughed at her phone, quiet, private, like she was sharing a joke with someone who wasn't in the room. I looked up. Everything good? Yeah, she said, still smiling at the screen, just the girls. There it was again. The phrase that always made it feel like I was living with a committee. I ate a few bites, trying to ignore it, but something was already brewing in me. Not even anger. More like that slow, sick pressure of feeling disrespected and not knowing how to say it without sounding dramatic. Then she said it, so casually, like it wasn't even a big deal. Oh, by the way, she said, eyes still on her phone, I ran into Ethan today. Ethan? Her ex. I froze for a second, not because I was terrified of the guy, but because that name had weight. He was the one she always claimed was no big deal. The one she swore was just someone she used to know. The one who somehow kept popping up in stories like he was a recurring character she refused to write out. I kept my tone calm. You ran into him where? At the coffee place by my office, she said. It was random. Okay, I said, and I waited. Because the details always came after, if they came at all. She finally looked up, like she realized I wasn't going to just let it slide. We talked for a bit. How long is a bit? She shrugged, like 20 minutes. 20 minutes. That's not a quick hello. That's a conversation. I set my fork down gently, the way you do when you're trying not to turn a moment into a bigger fight. Did you tell me because it actually doesn't matter, or because you knew I'd find out some other way? Her expression shifted immediately, defensive. Like my question itself was an accusation. What is that supposed to mean? She said. It means, I said carefully, we've talked about boundaries with exes. We've talked about how I'm not comfortable with you having these long catch-up sessions with him like it's nothing. She rolled her eyes. Oh my God. I didn't have a session. I ran into him. And then you stayed. He just asked how I was doing, she said, like that explained everything. It's not like I planned it. I could feel my patience thinning, not because she talked to him, but because of the way she was treating my discomfort like it was unreasonable. Look, I said, I'm not telling you you can't speak to him. I'm telling you it feels disrespectful to act like this is totally normal when we've already talked about it. If it was really nothing, why didn't you mention it until now? Why is it coming out like an afterthought while you're texting your friends? That's when she sat up straighter, eyes narrowing like she was switching modes. So now I'm not allowed to have friends either? I exhaled. Here we go. That's not what I said. But that's what you mean, she shot back. You always do this. You make it sound reasonable, but you're basically trying to control me. There it was, the word that always hit like a cheap shot. Control, the easy label. The one that flips the entire situation so I'm suddenly the villain for having a boundary. I kept my voice low. I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to understand why you think it's okay to spend 20 minutes with your ex and then act like I'm crazy for feeling weird about it. She laughed, not a warm laugh, a dismissive one, like I was being pathetic. Because it is crazy, she said. You're so insecure sometimes. That one stung, not because insecurity is the worst thing in the world, but because she said it with this tone like she was embarrassed to even be having the conversation. I felt my face get hot, but I stayed sitting, I stayed calm. Because I still thought, stupidly, that we were having a private conversation. That this was the two of us trying to navigate something real. Don't do that, I said. Don't turn it into, I'm insecure, as a way to avoid the actual issue. The issue is respect. If you want to keep your ex in your orbit, fine, but we need clear boundaries and honesty. That's all I'm saying. She stared at me for a second. Then she did that thing she always did when she didn't like where the conversation was going. She reached for her phone. I thought she was going to scroll. I thought she was going to distract herself. I thought she was going to do that silent treatment thing where she just checks out and lets the tension hang in the air. No. She looked at her screen, tapped, and then said, almost politely, like she was putting a meeting on hold, "Hold on a second." I blinked. What? Hold on, she repeated, already dialing. It took my brain a second to process what was happening because it was so absurd my mind refused to accept it. And then I heard the ring. She was calling someone. Right there. In the middle of the argument. I sat there, literally mid-breath, and watched her put the phone to her ear. Her face softened immediately, like she'd slipped into a different personality. The tension she'd had with me melted into this light, familiar tone. Hey, she said, drawing out the word like she was greeting someone at a party. Are you with the girls? I felt my stomach drop. She glanced at me, and there was something in her eyes that made me feel small, not fear, not guilt, more like I was about to be discussed. And she didn't even care that I could see it happening. Yeah, she said into the phone, I'm literally arguing with him right now. Arguing with him. Not talking, not working something out. arguing with him like it was a story. She covered the mic with her hand and looked at me like I was supposed to wait quietly, like she'd stepped out for a second and I should just pause my feelings until she was ready. I didn't say anything at first, I couldn't. I was sitting there feeling this wave of humiliation crawl up my chest, because suddenly the room didn't feel private anymore. It felt like I was in a theater and someone had turned on the lights. Then she laughed, a little, breathy giggle. And she said into the phone in that conspiratorial tone that makes your skin crawl when you realize you're the punchline, "No, you have to hear this. Listen." And then she turned slightly away from me, like she was giving them a better angle. I heard faint voices on the other end, multiple voices, overlapping, excited. I couldn't make out every word, but I heard enough to understand the energy. This wasn't a supportive "are you okay" call. This was entertainment. She spoke again. "Okay, so he's mad because I ran into Ethan and talked to him for like 20 minutes, and now he's doing his whole respect thing again." My whole respect thing. Like my need for boundaries was a personality quirk, like I was predictable, annoying, and kind of funny. I felt my throat tighten. I wanted to interrupt. I wanted to say, "Are you serious right now?" But I was so stunned that for a second, all I could do was sit there and listen to my relationship being summarized for a group chat live audience. Then she said the line that burned into my memory. She tilted her head, smirking, and said, "Girls, tell me if this is normal." That's when it clicked. This was not a conversation anymore. It was a vote. And the responses came fast. I heard laughter. I heard someone say something like, "Oh my God." I heard another voice, sharp, confident, say, "That's such a red flag." I don't even know if they meant me or the situation because she was already steering it. She'd framed it as me being insecure, me being controlling, me being dramatic about respect. And once you frame someone like that, the crowd reacts exactly how you want them to. She glanced at me again, like she was checking my reaction, and there was this tiny, satisfied look on her face, like she'd just regained control of the narrative, like she didn't have to deal with my feelings anymore because she'd brought in reinforcements. In that moment, something inside me went cold. Not anger, not rage, something worse, detachment. Because I realized I wasn't in an intimate relationship with a partner who wanted to understand me. I was in a relationship with someone who needed an audience, someone who needed to feel supported by a crowd more than she needed to be fair to me. And the humiliation wasn't just that she called them, it was the ease of it, the comfort, the way she did it like it was normal, like it was something she'd done 100 times in her head and was finally doing out loud. I looked at her, phone pressed to her ear, laughing lightly while her friends chimed in like commentators, and I had this horrifying thought. Our private life wasn't private. Our arguments weren't ours. Even my boundaries weren't being discussed between me and her. They were being judged, rated, and approved by a group of people who only knew the version of me she decided to send. I felt like our intimacy had become content. Like I was no longer her boyfriend. I was a story she told, a problem she presented, an example she used to get sympathy and validation. And sitting there in my own apartment, listening to the person I loved turn our relationship into a live segment for her friends, I realized something else too. This wasn't the first time she'd done it. It's when the person you're with stops treating your bond like something protected and starts treating it like something shareable, like something communal, like something that can be traded for laughter, validation, and social points. Because intimacy is supposed to be a safe place. Even when it's messy, even when you're fighting, you're supposed to believe that your partner won't turn around and use your vulnerability as material. And in that moment, I realized she didn't see our intimacy that way. She saw it as content. She saw it as a story she could tell in real time while I was still standing there, trying to be human with her. That's why it wasn't just rude. It wasn't just immature. It was diagnostic. It told me something about how she handled conflict, how she saw loyalty, how she protected herself. It told me she didn't want a resolution as much as she wanted reinforcement. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. Because if your partner needs an audience to talk to you, then you're not in a partnership. You're in a performance. When you bring the public into the relationship stops existing. After she hung up, the room felt different. Not quieter, just colder. Like the air had been replaced while I wasn't looking. She didn't come back to the conversation the way someone comes back after they've cooled down. She came back like someone who had been coached, like she'd just gotten off a call with a lawyer. And now she was ready to cross-examine me. She put her phone down on the table, screen still lit, and I could see notifications stacking up at the top like a live feed. She didn't even try to hide it. If anything, she positioned it in a way that made it obvious it was there, like it was a security blanket, or a weapon she could reach for again if she felt cornered. Then she looked at me and said, with this calm, practiced tone, "Okay, so all of them agree you're being weird about this." All of them. Not "I think," not "I feel," not "I hear what you're saying." It was like she delegated her own opinion to a committee and now she was just delivering the minutes from the meeting. I stared at her. "You mean your friends? They agree?" She shrugged, and there was this tiny smirk, like I'd just confirmed her point by asking. "Yes, they all said the same thing." I tried to keep my voice steady. "Of course they did. They only heard your version. They weren't here. They didn't hear me. They didn't see how you framed it." And the second I said that, her expression changed in this almost automatic way, like she'd been waiting for that line. "See, that's manipulative," she said. I blinked. "What?" "That's manipulative," she repeated, slower this time, like she was explaining something to a child. "You're trying to make me doubt what I know." "I'm not trying to make you doubt anything," I said, leaning forward slightly. "I'm telling you it's not fair to treat a group chat like it's an objective judge. I'm right here. Talk to me." She rolled her eyes so hard it actually made me pause. It wasn't even subtle. It was full-body disdain, like my request to be treated like a human being was exhausting. "God," she said, "you're literally gaslighting me right now." That word hit the room like a brick. Gaslighting. It's one of those words that, once someone uses it, the conversation is basically over, because now you're not discussing the issue, you're defending your character. You're not talking about boundaries or respect anymore, you're trying to prove you're not an abuser. And that's exactly what it felt like she was doing. I sat back, hands open in front of me. "Do you even know what gaslighting means?" Her eyes narrowed. "Yes, it means you're making me feel like I'm crazy for having normal interactions with people." I almost laughed, but it came out more like disbelief. "That's not what I'm doing. I'm not telling you you're crazy. I'm telling you I'm uncomfortable with you having a long conversation with your ex, and I'm telling you it's not okay to call your friends mid-argument and put me on trial." "Put you on trial?" she repeated, mocking my words. "Oh my God, listen to yourself." And then she did the thing that made my stomach sink even more, because it wasn't just the words, it was her behavior while I was speaking. She picked up her phone again. Not to call them this time, just to text. Her thumbs moved fast, and she wasn't even looking at me anymore. She was half facing me, half facing the screen like I was background noise. I stopped for a second. "Are you seriously texting right now?" She didn't even look up. "I'm just responding." "Responding to what?" She finally glanced at me, annoyed. "They're asking what's happening." "What's happening?" Like we were live streaming our relationship. I felt my face tighten. "So I'm not even talking to you. I'm talking to you and your phone." She sighed dramatically, like I was the difficult one. Like I was slowing down the inevitable conclusion. "You're making this bigger than it is." "That's the whole point," I said. "You keep saying that, you keep shrinking it. But it's big to me." And for a second, just a second, I thought maybe she'd hear that, because there was something in my voice that even I could hear. Not anger, hurt, real hurt. But she didn't lean in. She didn't soften. She didn't say, "Okay, talk to me." Instead, she went back to the labels, like she was flipping through a deck of cards until she found the one that ended the conversation. "You always do this," she said. "You twist things. You turn it around. You make it about you." I tried again, slower, more careful. "I'm not twisting anything. I'm telling you exactly what I'm feeling and why. I'm asking you for a basic boundary. Don't bring other people into our fights while we're having them. If you need to vent later, fine, but not like that." She laughed again, small, dismissive. "It's insane that you think you get to set rules for me." That sentence right there told me everything. Because I wasn't setting rules. I wasn't dictating her life. I was defining what I would and wouldn't accept in a relationship. And she heard it as a threat because it removed one of her biggest advantages, the ability to outsource conflict and come back with backup. I said, "It's not rules. It's respect. I'm not asking you to stop having friends. I'm asking you to stop turning our private conversations into a group discussion." She stared at me for a moment, then looked away and sighed like she was done, like she'd already reached the conclusion, and now she was just waiting for me to catch up. "You're being controlling," she said flatly. "That's what this is. It's controlling." And then, as if to prove her point to herself, she tapped her phone again and started typing while I was still talking. That was the micro-humiliation that actually broke something in me. Not the big, dramatic call. Not the accusations. The casual disrespect of treating my words like they weren't worth her full attention. Like I was some case study she was reporting on. Like I was a crazy boyfriend story she'd tell later with a dramatic sigh and a, "You guys listen to this intro." I watched her eyes flick between me and the phone screen, and I realized the conversation had died the moment she called them. What was happening now wasn't two people trying to understand each other. It was one person defending her narrative while the other person begged to be seen as human. Every time I tried to return to the actual topic, Ethan, boundaries, honesty, she pulled it back into labels. Manipulative, gaslighting, controlling, insecure. And those labels weren't meant to clarify, they were meant to shut me down. Because if she could reduce me to a label, she didn't have to engage with my point. She didn't have to hear me. She didn't have to admit she might have crossed a line. She just had to win. Eventually I stopped talking mid-sentence. Not because I ran out of words, but because I could feel myself becoming smaller with every second I kept trying. Like I was pleading for something she had already decided not to give. And in that silence, the truth was obvious. This wasn't a disagreement anymore. It wasn't a fight you work through. It wasn't two people clashing and then reconnecting. It was a trial. And I wasn't her partner in that room. I was the defendant. I didn't catch her the way people imagine catching someone. There was no dramatic confrontation where I grabbed her phone and started scrolling like a psycho. I didn't want to be that guy. I didn't want to turn into a detective in my own relationship. But once that call happened, my brain couldn't let it go. Because now I knew for a fact what I'd only suspected before. Our private life wasn't private. It was being exported, packaged, shared. And when you know something like that is happening, you start noticing the little things you used to ignore. It was later that night, after the conversation basically collapsed and we went into that icy silence people do when they don't know how to end a fight. She went to take a shower. I stayed in the living room, not even watching the TV, just staring at it like it might tell me how I got here. Her phone was on the coffee table. Face up. Normally I wouldn't touch it. I'd never been the type to check someone's phone. To me, if you're at the point where you're snooping, the relationship is already sick. I believe that. I still do. But the screen lit up with a notification bright enough that I could read it without moving an inch. And the notification wasn't from one person. It was from a group chat. The name at the top was something stupidly cute, like they were a brand, the girls clinking glasses or girl council or whatever, some little inside joke that felt like a punch in the gut in that moment. And underneath it was a message preview. Not long, just one line, but it was enough. Tell him if he wants, respect so bad he can earn it. I felt my stomach drop like I'd missed a step on the stairs. Because it wasn't just that they were talking about me, it was the tone, the contempt, the certainty that I was the one who needed to be managed, punished, trained. My first instinct was to look away, to pretend I didn't see it, to hold on to the last shred of dignity and not engage with it. But then the phone lit up again, another preview. He's doing that victim thing again. Then another. Honestly, I'd make him sweat. Don't answer. Let him sit in it. And suddenly, it wasn't one message. It was a flood. Not even just her friends responding. Her responding too, because her phone kept lighting up like it was in the middle of a live debate. I sat there, frozen, and I hated myself for doing it, but I picked up the phone, not to go digging through years of messages, not to scroll back and build a case, just to see what the hell they were saying about me right now. The thread was open, like she'd left it mid-sentence when she went to shower. And the first thing I saw was a message from her that made my chest tighten. Guys, I swear he's exhausting. He always turns everything into this respect lecture. Respect lecture. There it was again, my boundary reduced into a joke. My feelings turned into a personality flaw. Then the replies started, stacked one after another, like they'd been waiting for this moment. Classic. He's insecure because Ethan is better than him. Men like that always need control. And then, because it wasn't enough to just judge me, they started doing what people do in group chats when they want to feel powerful, psychoanalyzing. He's like that because he probably had a weird relationship with his mom. I bet he got rejected a lot growing up. He wants you to feel guilty so you'll cave. I stared at the screen like it was written in another language. These people didn't know me. Not really. They'd been around me at dinners, maybe. They'd seen me smile and be polite and ask how work was. They'd had small talk with me. That was it. And here they were, tearing me apart like I was a character they had the right to rewrite. I scrolled just enough to see that it wasn't new, not a one-time vent. This was a pattern. Screenshots of my texts, cropped, context missing, followed by laughing reactions. Her adding little captions like a commentator, "He sent this unprompted. He's so dramatic. Help." And there were details, private details. Not just "we argued," details. The kind of details you only share when you're not thinking about your partner as a person, when you're thinking of them as a topic. There was a message from her where she'd written something like, "He gets quiet when he's overwhelmed, and it drives me insane." That one hit me in a specific place because it was true. It's something I'd admitted to her once, on a good night, when we were close. I told her, "When I shut down, it's not to punish you. It's because I'm overstimulated, and I'm trying not to say something cruel." I trusted her with that. And she turned it into ammunition for the group chat. Then I saw a meme, literally a meme. Some stupid image about men who need boundaries or boyfriends who act like therapists. I don't even remember the exact joke. I just remember the feeling of my face getting hot with embarrassment. It was like being laughed at in a room you didn't know you were standing in. And the advice got uglier as I scrolled. Punish him. Let him think he messed up. If he's acting like this, he's hiding something. Make him apologize. Don't give in. It wasn't advice to solve a relationship problem. It was strategy. It was warfare. It was about winning. And in between those messages, my girlfriend was replying with little laughing emojis and, "You're so right," and "I know www." I put the phone down like it burned my hand. My heart was pounding, not in a jealous way, not in a "I'm going to confront her and explode" way, more like a sick realization settling into my body. I wasn't just fighting with her. I was fighting with an entire narrative about me that had been built behind my back. And that narrative didn't see me as a full person. It saw me as an obstacle, a boyfriend archetype, the insecure, controlling guy they could mock and manage. When she came out of the shower, she was in a towel, hair dripping, acting like the night was just normal, like we'd had a little fight and now it was time to reset. She walked past the coffee table, saw her phone, and paused, just for a half second. Not a panic, but a flicker, a calculation. "You were on my phone?" she asked. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "What happened?" Not, "Why are you looking like that?" Just, "Did you access the evidence?" I looked at her and I could feel my voice shaking, even though I didn't want it to. "I saw the notifications," I said. "I didn't go looking. It was right there." She frowned, like I'd committed the bigger crime. "That's an invasion of privacy." And I almost laughed, because the irony was so sharp it hurt. "Privacy?" I said. "You're sending screenshots of my messages to your group chat. You're letting them dissect me. You literally called them mid-argument. And you're mad at me because your phone lit up on the table?" She crossed her arms, towel clutched tight, eyes hardening. "It's just the girls. They're helping me." "Helping you." That's what she called it. But all I could hear was that line from earlier, "Tell him if he wants respect so bad, he can earn it." That wasn't help. That was contempt. And the worst part wasn't even her friends being mean. Friends are loyal. Friends talk reckless in private. I get that. The betrayal was her inviting it, feeding it, laughing with it, turning our relationship into a group activity and then acting like I was the problem for noticing. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to get her back. I didn't want to screenshot their messages and send them to anyone. I didn't want to humiliate her the way she'd humiliated me. I just wanted one thing, and I realized in that moment how simple and how impossible it was. I wanted to feel safe with the person I loved. And sitting there, knowing there was a whole chat thread full of my private moments being treated like entertainment, I knew I didn't have that. Not with her. Not anymore. The next day, I didn't come in angry. I didn't come in yelling or slamming doors or doing that dramatic "we need to talk" thing like I was in a movie. I came in tired. Tired in a way that felt older than one night, like something in me had been worn down for a while and I'd just been pretending it wasn't. She was in the kitchen making coffee like nothing had happened, hair in a messy bun, oversized sweatshirt, scrolling with one hand while the kettle hissed. The normal version of her. The version that could make you forget the disrespect because she looked so familiar. "Morning," she said, like we were a normal couple on a normal day. I stood there for a second, watching her thumb flick across her screen, and I realized this was the exact problem. We could act normal forever as long as we never addressed the thing underneath. We could keep living on the surface. But I couldn't. "Can we talk?" I asked. She sighed, like she already knew where it was going. "About what?" "About what?" Like it wasn't obvious. I sat down at the table. I kept my voice low, controlled. "About last night. About the group chat. About you calling your friends in the middle of an argument." Her eyes flicked up for half a second, then back to the phone. "I already told you, it's not a big deal." "It is to me," I said. That finally got her attention. She put the phone down, but not gently, more like she was setting it down the way you set down something you don't want to prove you're cooperating. "Okay," she said, "say what you need to say." I took a breath because I didn't want this to turn into a fight about tone. I wanted it to be clear. "I don't want our problems to become material for your group," I said. "I'm not talking about you having friends. I'm not talking about you getting support. I'm talking about you turning private, emotional conversations into content. Screenshots, voice notes, live updates. That's not okay with me." Her expression tightened immediately, like she'd been waiting for a chance to be offended. "You're being dramatic," she said. "No," I said, keeping my eyes on her. "I'm being honest. If you need support after the fact, fine. If you need to vent and say I'm upset, fine. But not during. Not like that. Not with humiliating details. Not with your friends weighing in like they're on a panel and I'm on trial." She leaned back in her chair and gave me this look, half annoyed, half amused, like I was lecturing her about manners. "So what, I'm not allowed to talk to my friends?" she said. There it was, the first pivot, the first rewrite. "That's not what I said," I replied. "I literally just said support is fine. I'm asking for boundaries. I'm asking for basic respect." She shook her head, already dismissing it. "It's the same thing. You're trying to isolate me." I stared at her. "Isolate you?" "Yes," she said, louder now, like saying it louder made it truer. "You don't want me to talk to anyone about what's happening in my life. That's isolating. That's a control thing." Control. Again. It was like she had a button she could press that instantly turned me into the villain. Because the second she called it control, suddenly I wasn't a boyfriend asking for dignity. I was an insecure guy trying to trap her. I kept my voice even. "I'm not trying to control you. I'm telling you what I will not accept in a relationship. There's a difference." She laughed, short and sharp. "Oh my God, you hear yourself? I will not accept. That's literally controlling." "No," I said, "that's a boundary." "A boundary for you, maybe," she snapped. "But it affects me. It affects who I can talk to." I could feel myself getting frustrated, because this was exactly the short circuit I'd been trying to explain. Any attempt to set a boundary became, in her mind, an attack, a threat, a restriction. I leaned forward slightly. "Listen, you can talk to whoever you want. But if your way of coping is to broadcast our fights and let your friends call me manipulative and tell you to punish me, then I'm telling you I'm not doing that. I'm not living like that." Her eyes narrowed. "So you're threatening me now?" "I'm not threatening you," I said. "I'm describing reality." That made her pause for half a second, and I thought maybe it landed. But then she grabbed another angle, like she was cycling through arguments until she found one that stuck. "If you have nothing to hide," she said, "why does it bother you so much?" I blinked. "What?" "If you're so confident you're right," she continued, "why are you so scared of other people hearing about it? That's suspicious." There it was, the implication. If I wanted privacy, it meant I was guilty of something. And that's when I realized how she saw it. She saw privacy as a shield, a trick, a way to get away with something. Because in her world, the group chat was the truth machine. The group chat was the accountability. But to me, it wasn't accountability. It was exposure. I took a breath, and my voice came out calmer than I felt. "It bothers me because I'm not trying to hide anything. I'm trying to keep our relationship from becoming public entertainment. Privacy isn't about secrets. It's about dignity." She rolled her eyes again. "Here we go with the speeches." I ignored that. I kept going, because I needed her to hear it. It's not privacy when it's used to lie. It's dignity when it's used to not be exposed. That finally made her look at me properly, like she couldn't just brush it off with a joke. I said, "You want to talk to your friends? Fine. But you don't get to turn my texts into screenshots for laughs. You don't get to call them mid-argument and let them label me while I'm standing there. You don't get to invite contempt into the relationship and then act like I'm the problem for wanting it to stop." Her face hardened. "You're overreacting." "I'm not," I said. "I saw the messages. I saw punish him. I saw make him sweat. I saw them telling you I'm insecure and controlling and worse. And I saw you laughing with them. That's not support. That's not venting. That's disrespect." She looked away, jaw tight. For a moment, I thought she might actually feel shame. Instead, she doubled down. "They're my friends," she said. "They care about me. They're protecting me." "From what?" I asked genuinely. "From me asking you to respect me?" She snapped her head back toward me. "You're twisting it. You always twist it." And there it was again, labels instead of substance. Anything to avoid the actual question. Why did you need to humiliate me to feel supported? I sat back, and in that moment I felt something shift. Not in her, in me. Because I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't about wording or tone or how I said it. She understood exactly what I meant. She just didn't like what it required from her. Restraint, accountability, loyalty. In her mind, loyalty was negotiable if it conflicted with her need for validation. And that's when it hit me, clean and brutal. For her, respect wasn't a baseline, it was optional. It was something she could trade away the moment it cost her something, like the comfort of her group chat taking her side. I remember looking at her across the table, coffee steam rising between us, and realizing I wasn't arguing about one incident anymore. I was arguing with her values. And in that moment, I knew exactly where I stood in her hierarchy. Below her friends' opinions. Below her need to be right. Below her comfort. And once you see that, you can't pretend you don't. After that conversation, I didn't feel like we'd cleared the air. I felt like we'd opened a door we couldn't close. Because once you bring other people into the middle of your relationship like that, it doesn't stay theoretical. It doesn't stay in the group chat. It leaks. And it leaked fast. At first, it was subtle, small shifts that only someone living it would notice. We'd meet up with her friends for drinks, and the vibe would be off. Not openly hostile, just different. Like I walked into the room and the temperature dropped 2 degrees. One of her friends, this girl who used to hug me hello, who used to ask about my job and laugh at my dumb jokes, started greeting me with this tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Another would look at me for a beat too long before saying hi, like she was studying me, like she was comparing the guy in front of her to the story she'd been told. And then came the little comments, the kind that are just vague enough to deny if you call them out. "So how are we doing today?" one of them would say, like she was talking to a couple in therapy. Or, "Don't be mad, okay?" said with a smile, like it was a joke, but not really. Or the worst one, a quiet little laugh after I said something normal, like they were all hearing it through a different filter. Like they were thinking, "There he goes again." I'd catch them exchanging looks sometimes, not dramatic eye rolls, just a glance, a shared expression. That silent little moment where two people communicate, we know what he's really like. And every time it happened, I could feel myself tightening up. My shoulders would go stiff. My jokes would come out forced. I'd start monitoring everything I said the way you do when you feel judged. Because that's what triangulation does. It turns you into an object in other people's eyes. You're not just a person anymore. You're a topic, a case, a warning. The worst part was how my girlfriend acted like this was normal, like it was just her friends being protective, and I should accept it. One night we were all out at a bar, sitting around one of those high tables that make you feel like you can never get comfortable. Everyone had drinks. Everyone was laughing a little too loud. That's when people get brave. Her friend, the one who always had an opinion on everything, leaned in and said, "So are you still doing your whole respect thing?" She said it with a smile, like it was playful. But the table got quiet for just a second, that tiny silence where you realize this isn't actually a joke. This is a test, a probe, a way to see how you react. I looked at her. "My whole respect thing?" She shrugged. "You know, like boundaries and all that." And then she laughed, and a couple of the other girls laughed too, but it wasn't because it was funny. It was because they were on the same side. I turned to my girlfriend, waiting for her to shut it down, to say, "Hey, don't do that," to defend me the way you'd defend your partner from unnecessary disrespect. She didn't. She just took a sip of her drink, eyes down, like she was letting it happen. And in that moment, I realized what was really going on. It wasn't just that her friends knew too much. It was that they felt entitled to it. They felt like they had a role in our relationship, like they were stakeholders. And my girlfriend had given them that role. After that, it escalated from looks and comments to full-on participation. She started quoting them like scripture. "The girls think you're being dramatic." The girl said, "That's a red flag." The girl said, "I shouldn't put up with that." The craziest part is she'd say it during conversations that should have been private. Like we'd be in the car, just us, and she'd be mid-argument and suddenly she'd drop, "The girls literally told me I should leave you." Just like that. No hesitation. No awareness of what that does to someone. I remember gripping the steering wheel and staring at the road because I didn't want her to see the expression on my face. "You told them that?" I asked. She shrugged. "Of course I did. They're my friends." "So your friends are now advising you to break up with me," I said, "and you're telling me this like it's normal?" Her response was so casual it made me feel insane. They just want what's best for me. And that sentence was a knife, because what it really meant was, what's best for you isn't part of the calculation. Once her friends became the reference point, everything turned into a group-approved decision. Even small things. If I brought up something that bothered me, she'd say, "I talked to the girls and they think you're overreacting." If I asked for space, the girls said that's avoidant. If I wanted to work through something, the girls said you're just trying to keep me hooked. It was like no matter what I did, there was a label waiting for me, pre-assigned, crowdsourced, ready to be used. And then came the night that made it impossible to pretend it was harmless. We were at dinner with two of her friends, and the conversation turned to relationships. One of them started talking about toxic boyfriends, and I could feel the way the topic was drifting toward me like a slow spotlight. Then her friend looked right at me and said, "So, do you let her hang out with guys?" I blinked. "Do I let her?" "Yeah," she said, smiling. "Like, are you one of those controlling ones?" It wasn't curiosity. It was an accusation dressed up as a question. I looked at my girlfriend again. Again, she didn't shut it down. She just watched me, waiting to see how I'd answer. Like this was a performance, and she was letting her friends grade it. And that's when I understood the strongest, ugliest truth about triangulation. You stop being someone's partner and you start being someone's project. I wasn't dating her anymore. I was being evaluated by her circle. Every answer I gave was evidence. Every reaction was data. So I started withdrawing. Not dramatically, not with a big announcement, just emotionally, the way you do when you realize you're not safe. I stopped bringing things up. I stopped trying to explain my feelings. I stopped trying to fix misunderstandings because I could already hear the group chat responses in my head. I could already picture the screenshots. I could already imagine the voice notes. I started choosing silence over vulnerability. And the scary part is that she seemed relieved. Because my silence meant less conflict, less discomfort, less need for her to choose between me and her audience. But for me, it meant something else. It meant I was slowly shutting down inside a relationship I was still physically in. And every time she quoted the girls like they were the final authority, the message became clearer. This wasn't just her friends being involved. This was my girlfriend letting other people sit in the driver's seat of our relationship. And I could feel myself stepping further and further back, because at some point you realize there's no space for two people when a crowd is already taking up the room. There wasn't one single moment where I stood up and said, "Okay, that's it, I'm done." It didn't happen like a movie scene where you suddenly become this decisive, fearless version of yourself. It was quieter than that. It was the moment I realized I was exhausted, not from the arguments, but from the structure of the arguments, the way they were designed for me to lose. The way every conversation turned into a loop where I had to prove I wasn't a bad person before I was even allowed to talk about what hurt me. And once I saw that, I stopped doing something I'd been doing for weeks without realizing it. I stopped trying to be right. Because up until then, a part of me was still playing the game. I kept thinking if I found the perfect words, if I explained it calmly enough, if I stayed patient, if I showed her how unfair it was, then she'd get it. She'd snap out of it. She'd realize her friends weren't the relationship. She'd come back to me. But I started noticing something that made that hope feel naive. The goalposts moved every time. If I brought up the X boundary, it became about my insecurity. If I brought up the group chat, it became about her freedom. If I brought up screenshots, it became about her privacy. If I brought up respect, it became about my control. It never stayed on the topic. It always ended up with me defending my character. And I realized something: I could win every point logically and still lose the relationship emotionally. Because what I was fighting wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a system. Her system was simple. When she felt uncomfortable, she ran to the crowd. When she felt challenged, she reframed me as the problem. When I tried to set a boundary, she treated it like a threat. And the more I tried to argue my way out of it, the more I played into the dynamic. So the turning point wasn't me getting louder. It was me getting quieter in a different way. I stopped asking myself, am I right? I stopped replaying conversations in my head like a lawyer preparing a case. I stopped fantasizing about the one perfect line that would finally make her understand. I stopped trying to beat the narrative. Instead, I started asking myself one question: One simple question that had nothing to do with who was right and who was wrong. Am I emotionally safe with this person? Not, do I love her? I did. Not, is she a bad person? I didn't even know if that mattered anymore. Not, could this be fixed? Maybe. Just, am I safe? Safe to be imperfect. Safe to be vulnerable. Safe to say, that hurt, without it being screenshot and analyzed. Safe to disagree without being labeled. Safe to set a boundary without being punished. And once I started looking at it through that lens, the whole relationship looked different. Like I'd been staring at a blurry picture and someone finally adjusted the focus. Because I didn't need another argument to know the answer. I could measure it by her behavior. When we had conflict, did she come toward me or did she go outward? When I was hurt, did she get curious or did she get defensive? When I asked for basic respect, did she try or did she negotiate it like it was optional? I started watching instead of debating, and what I saw was a pattern so consistent it scared me. First, she prioritized external validation over internal trust. The group chat mattered more than the relationship, not because she loved her friends more than me necessarily, but because the group gave her instant comfort. Instant agreement. Instant identity. In the group, she was always the protagonist. In the relationship, she sometimes had to face the fact that she might be wrong, or unfair, or careless. And she hated that. So whenever the relationship required her to sit in discomfort, she outsourced it. Second, she ridiculed instead of respecting. Not always to my face, which would have been easier, honestly. She did it indirectly. Through her tone. Through the way she'd mimic my words back to me. Through the way respect became a joke. Through the way my boundaries became my whole thing. And ridicule is poison, because it doesn't just disagree with you, it lowers you. It turns your feelings into something embarrassing. It teaches you to shut up. Third, she treated boundaries like an attack. The moment I said, I don't want our private problems turned into group content, she heard, I'm taking something away from you. The moment I said, don't call your friends mid-argument, she heard, I'm trying to control you. The moment I said, don't screenshot my messages, she heard, you're hiding something. In her mind, my boundaries weren't about creating safety. They were about limiting her. And that's when I realized we weren't speaking the same emotional language. I was saying dignity. She was hearing restriction. Fourth, she used my vulnerability as leverage. This one hurt the most to admit, because it changed how I saw everything. The more I looked back, the more I realized that anything I shared in a soft moment could come back later in a hard moment, reframed, mocked, repackaged. If I admitted I get quiet when overwhelmed, it became, he shuts down to punish me. If I said I needed reassurance sometimes, it became, he's insecure. If I said I cared about respect, it became his little lecture. That's not a relationship. That's an environment where vulnerability is risky. And once vulnerability is risky, love becomes work. You're always managing, always editing, always trying to stay ahead of how you'll be perceived. That's when it hit me. I wasn't anxious because I didn't trust myself. I was anxious because I didn't trust what would happen to me in her hands. So I stopped fighting in the way I used to. I stopped taking the bait when she threw labels at me. When she said controlling, I didn't launch into a 10-minute defense. When she said manipulative, I didn't start listing evidence. I just watched. I listened. I noted it. Because arguing wasn't revealing truth, it was feeding the machine. And the more I stopped arguing, the clearer things got. I noticed how quickly she went back to her friends after any tension, like she needed to refill her confidence. I noticed how her apologies, when they happened, were shallow, more about ending the moment than understanding the impact. I noticed how she wanted peace, but not repair. I noticed how she wanted me calmer, but not necessarily happier. And that's the moment I stopped trying to win her understanding. I didn't want to win a discussion. I wanted an adult relationship. One where conflict stays between two people until it's resolved. One where privacy isn't treated like guilt. One where boundaries are respected even when they're inconvenient. One where your partner protects your dignity even when they're upset with you. And once you realize that's what you want, you start seeing the gap between what you're building and what you're actually living. The pain changes shape. It stops being desperation and becomes clarity. Because you finally understand you're not asking for perfection. You're asking to be safe. Once I had that clarity, I knew I had two options. Option one was to keep doing what I'd been doing, arguing in circles, swallowing my discomfort, trying to communicate better while the actual problem stayed untouched. basically slowly disappearing inside the relationship until all that was left was routine and resentment. Option 2 was to define the standard, not as a threat, not as some dramatic ultimatum where I try to scare her into behaving, just a clear line in the sand that said, this is what I need if we're going to keep doing this. So I picked a night where we weren't already fighting. No alcohol, no audience, no one catching me at an emotional peak. I waited until we were both home. The apartment was quiet, and the energy was neutral. She was on the couch, scrolling, like always. I sat down across from her, and for once I didn't try to ease into it with jokes or small talk. I need to say something, I told her, and I need you to hear it all the way through before you respond. She looked up like she was already annoyed. Okay. I nodded, keeping my voice calm. This isn't an argument. This is me explaining what I need in order to feel safe in this relationship. That word, safe, made her shift slightly. Like she didn't love it, like it sounded too serious to ignore. I continued. I'm not trying to take your friends away. I'm not trying to isolate you. I'm not trying to control you. I'm telling you what I can and can't be part of. She sighed. Here we go. I held my hand up. Not aggressive, just firm. Please, just listen. And then I laid it out the way I wish I'd laid it out from the beginning. Simple, specific, and based on behavior. First, I said, conflicts get discussed between us first, always. If we have a problem, we talk, we deal with it, we try to understand each other. If you need support afterward, fine, talk to your friends. But not while we're in the middle of it, and not as a way to replace the conversation. She opened her mouth like she was about to jump in, but I kept going. Second, I said, no intimate details get shared for entertainment or alliance. I'm not talking about you saying, we had a rough day, or I'm upset. I'm talking about screenshots, mocking, private details, and any version of our relationship that turns me into a joke or a villain for your group chat. I'm not going to be someone's content. Her face tightened at that like she wanted to deny it, but she didn't. Third, I said, if you call a third party during a discussion to put pressure on me, if you pull in your friends mid-argument, then the conversation ends immediately. I won't fight for a microphone in my own relationship. I'll walk away from the conversation and we can revisit it later when it's just us. I let the silence sit for a second because I wanted the weight of it to land. I wasn't shouting. I wasn't pleading. I was stating it like a policy, the way you state any non-negotiable condition for something to work. Then I said the one line I'd been repeating to myself for days, the line that kept me from being baited into the "you're isolating me" trap. I'm not taking your friends away, I told her. I'm asking you not to bring them into our emotional bed. That got a reaction, a real one. She looked at me like I had insulted her. That's such a dramatic way to put it. It's accurate, I said. Because when you bring them into our fights, when you screenshot my words, when you let them weigh in on me like I'm on trial, you're bringing them into the most intimate part of the relationship. You're letting them inside the space that's supposed to be protected. She shook her head. You're making it sound like I'm doing something evil. I'm not calling you evil, I said. I'm telling you the impact. I'm telling you how it feels to be on the other side of it. Her tone sharpened. So what, I'm supposed to just not talk to anyone when I'm upset? Here it was again, the same rewrite. The same attempt to make my boundary sound like an extreme demand. I stayed calm. That's not what I said. Talk to people after, get support, vent. But you don't get to use your friends as backup in the middle of conflict. And you don't get to share private material in a way that humiliates me. She scoffed. Humiliates you? Really? Yes, I said without blinking. Really. And that was the key shift. I stopped minimizing it to make her comfortable. I stopped softening my truth to avoid being called sensitive. I just owned it. It's humiliating to know that anything I say could end up screenshot and judged, I continued. It's humiliating to be in the middle of a serious conversation and watch you pick up your phone to get a panel involved. It makes me feel like I'm not your partner. I'm a topic. And I'm not doing that. Her eyes darted to her phone, like even in that moment it was calling to her. Then she crossed her arms. So you're giving me rules. I'm giving you standards, I said, for what I will participate in. That's the same thing, she snapped. It's not, I replied. Rules are what you set to control someone else. Standards are what you set to protect yourself. She stared at me, and for a second the room was quiet enough that I could hear the refrigerator hum. This wasn't like our other fights. There was no back and forth momentum. I wasn't chasing her. I wasn't trying to convince her I was good. I wasn't performing. I was just being clear. And I think that's what unsettled her, because clarity takes away the fog people hide in. She tried one last angle. If you're so confident you're not doing anything wrong, why do you care what my friends think? I didn't even flinch this time, because I'm not ashamed of my behavior. I'm protective of my dignity. She rolled her eyes like she wanted to laugh it off, but I didn't give her room. I'm not asking you to keep secrets, I said. I'm asking you not to expose me. Those are different. She leaned forward, voice lower now, more intense. So if I talk to my friends, you're going to walk away? If you talk to them after, respectfully, that's your choice, I said. If you call them during conflict, yes, I'm walking away. Because I'm not going to sit there while I'm being judged by a group that doesn't have the full context. I'm not going to compete with your phone for your loyalty. She looked at me like she didn't recognize me. And maybe she didn't, because for a long time, I'd been bending to keep the peace. I'd been trying to prove I was reasonable. I'd been swallowing my discomfort so she wouldn't accuse me of being controlling. But the thing is, when you're clear about your boundaries, you stop negotiating your self-respect. I could see it in her face. She was trying to decide whether I was bluffing, whether this was another moment she could outlast until I backed down. And I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten to leave that night. I didn't say, do this or I'm gone. That would have been emotional manipulation, and it would have kept us in the same toxic dynamic. All I said was the truth. This is the relationship I'm willing to have, I told her. If that doesn't work for you, then we have a bigger problem than Ethan or any argument. We have a values problem. I stood up, not to storm off, but to end the conversation before it spiraled. And as I walked away, the line kept repeating in my head, the one that made it impossible to rationalize my boundary as control. I'm not taking your friends away. I'm asking you not to bring them into our emotional bed. The next couple weeks were the real test, not the speeches, not the arguments, not the communication conversations where everyone says the right words and nothing changes. Real life tests you in small moments. Because anyone can nod when you're being calm and serious. Anyone can say, okay, I hear you. The question is what they do the next time they feel uncomfortable, the next time they want validation, the next time they want control back. So I stopped debating and started watching. And it didn't take long before the pattern showed itself. The first mini-test happened 3 days later over something stupid. Plans. We were supposed to go to her cousin's birthday dinner. I'd told her earlier in the week that I had a work deadline and might be late. When the day came, I texted her at noon. I'm going to run behind. I'll meet you there. When I got home, she was already dressed, already annoyed, pacing with her phone in her hand. So you're just not coming? She said. I am coming, I replied. I told you I'd be late. She rolled her eyes. You always do this. You always make me look stupid. I took a breath. I'm not trying to make you look stupid. I'm trying to finish my work and still show up. She didn't respond to that. She just picked up her phone, thumb hovering, the way it always did, right before she went outward. And I watched it happen, like slow motion. Her eyes dropped to the screen, and she started typing, fast. Not to her cousin, not to the restaurant, to the group chat. My chest tightened, but I didn't raise my voice. I didn't jump into a defensive monologue. I just stood up from the couch and said, calmly, we can talk when it's just us. She looked up sharply. What? If you're texting them about this, I said, I'm not continuing the conversation. She scoffed, holding the phone up like I was accusing her of a crime. I'm not even doing anything. I'm just talking to my friends. I'm not telling you you can't, I said. I'm telling you I'm not participating in a conversation with an audience. Then I walked into the kitchen and started doing dishes that didn't need doing, just to give myself something physical to focus on. She sat there in silence for a minute, and I could feel the tension radiating off her like heat. Then she did what she always did when she didn't get the reaction she wanted. She punished me with silence. Not the calm, healthy kind of silence, the kind that's meant to make you uncomfortable enough to chase, the kind that's meant to make you apologize just to end the tension. I didn't chase. I didn't follow her around. I didn't ask, are you mad 10 times? I didn't bend. I let the silence sit there, because I finally understood something. If my boundary only works when she's in a good mood, it's not a boundary, it's a suggestion. The second mini-test happened about a week in, when we had a conversation about Ethan again. Not even a fight, a conversation. She brought him up casually. Ethan texted me, and my stomach did that familiar drop. What did he want? I asked. She shrugged. Just checking in. I kept my tone calm. Okay, did you respond? She paused for half a second, just enough to make me notice. Yeah, she said, but it was nothing. Can I see it? I asked, not like a demand, more like a reality check. Because, at this point, trust had been damaged, and I wasn't going to pretend it wasn't. Her eyes flashed. Why? Because this is the exact kind of thing we keep circling, I said, and I'm tired of circling. She looked down at her phone, and then she hit me with the line I knew was coming before she even said it. I already asked the girls, she said. They think you're being insecure. There it was. The verdict delivered before the conversation even started. I nodded slowly, like I was accepting information from a stranger. Okay. She blinked. Okay. If you already asked them, I said, then this isn't a conversation, it's a ruling, and I'm not doing that. She stared at me like I'd spoken another language. So you're just done talking? I'm done talking when the answer is already decided, I replied. If you want to talk to me, talk to me. If you want to talk to them. But I'm not going to argue with your group chat through you. And then I did something I'd never done before. I ended the conversation on purpose. I stood up, grabbed my keys, and said, I'm going for a drive. We can talk later if you're actually talking to me. I could hear her behind me, voice rising. So you're just walking away? Wow, mature. But I didn't turn around, not because I was trying to punish her, because I was protecting my nervous system, protecting my dignity, protecting the boundary. The third mini-test was the most subtle, and in some ways the most revealing. We were in bed, and she was scrolling. I could see the glow of her phone reflecting on the ceiling. She laughed quietly, one of those private laughs again. What's funny? I asked. She hesitated. Nothing. I looked over, and I saw my name on the screen again. Not in a message from me, mentioned in the chat. My stomach tightened. Are you talking about me? She pulled the phone closer to her chest like I'd tried to grab it. Why do you care? And there it was, the defensive reflex, the instinct to protect the group chat first. I sat up. Because we talked about this. I'm not telling you can't vent, but I'm telling you I'm not okay being mocked or analyzed like a project. She rolled her eyes. Nobody's mocking you. I held her gaze. Then show me. Silence. Not because she didn't have time. Because she didn't want to. And in that moment, I didn't explode, I didn't demand, I didn't snatch the phone. I just got out of bed. She watched me, confused. Where are you going? To sleep on the couch, I said, because I'm not sharing a bed with someone who's actively disrespecting me and then denying it. Her mouth fell open. You're being ridiculous. Maybe, but I slept better than I had in weeks. By the end of the 2 weeks, the pattern was undeniable. Sometimes she tried, briefly. She'd catch herself, put the phone down, act like she was choosing me. But the moment she felt threatened, the moment she felt like she might be wrong, she ran back to the same system, the tribunal, the audience, the backup. And my reaction stayed consistent. I didn't argue with her friends. I didn't compete with her phone. I didn't chase her silence. I enforced the boundary quietly, every time. And the more I did, the clearer the truth became. She wasn't struggling to understand my boundary. She understood it. She just didn't like what it took away, her ability to win arguments by outsourcing them. That's what those 2 weeks taught me. Not with words, with behavior. The final blow-up didn't happen because of Ethan. It didn't happen because of one more screenshot or one more, the girls said, comment. It happened because, after 2 weeks of me holding the same boundary calmly, she finally ran out of ways to pretend it wasn't real. It was a Friday night. Nothing special. We'd both been doing our own thing. Me trying to keep my head down at work, her bouncing between plans and messages and whatever her friends had going on that weekend. The apartment was quiet in that tense way that looks peaceful on the outside and feels like a bruise on the inside. She was on the couch, phone in hand, laughing every few minutes. Not even loudly, just that little breathy laugh that meant she wasn't really present with me. I was in the kitchen making something simple, pasta, nothing fancy, when I heard her say my name under her breath, like she was reading it. I didn't turn it into a fight. I didn't snap. I just asked, as neutrally as I could, "Are you talking about me again?" She didn't answer right away. That pause told me enough. I walked into the living room and stood near the coffee table, not looming, not aggressive, just present. "Are you?" I repeated. She finally looked up, and her expression was already defensive. "Why do you always assume the worst?" "I'm not assuming," I said. "I'm asking. Because every time things get tense, your phone becomes your escape route, and I'm not doing that anymore." She rolled her eyes. "You're obsessed with my phone." "I'm obsessed with being respected," I replied. Big difference. That hit a nerve. I saw it in her face, the way her jaw tightened, the way her shoulders pulled back like she was bracing. She sat up straighter, like this wasn't a conversation anymore. This was a stance. I can't believe we're still doing this, she said. We're still doing it because it's still happening, I said, keeping my voice steady. I set a boundary. You agreed to it. And then you keep breaking it, and when I enforce it, you act like I'm the problem. She scoffed. Because you are. You're making everything about you. I took a breath. No, I'm making it about us, about the relationship, about what stays between two people and what doesn't. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Oh my God, you want a relationship in a bubble, that's not real life. I don't want a bubble, I said. I want privacy. I want dignity. I want to know that when I'm struggling, or when we're arguing, I'm not being turned into a story for your friends. She stared at me like I was asking her to cut off a limb. Do you hear yourself? She said. You're telling me I can't talk to the people closest to me. There it is again, I said quietly. That's not what I'm saying. It is what you're saying, she insisted, voice rising. You want me to shut up and keep everything to myself so you can control the narrative. I felt my chest tighten, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I'd heard this exact line so many times it had become a script. I'm not trying to control anything, I said. I'm trying to keep our relationship from being decided by people who aren't in it. Her eyes flashed. They're in it because I let them be in it. That sentence hung in the air for a second, and I swear the room got quieter around it. I blinked. What does that mean? It was like she realized she'd said something too honest, and instead of backing down, she doubled down hard. It means exactly what it means, she said. They're my friends. They're my support system. They're the people I trust. I'm not going to stop talking to them because you're sensitive. Sensitive. That word again. Always the same move. Reduce my boundary to a flaw. I nodded slowly. So you're choosing them over us. She let out this dramatic sigh like I was exhausting her. God, you're so dramatic. It's not choosing. It's my life. They're part of my life. I'm not asking you to remove them from your life, I said, voice still controlled. I'm asking you to remove them from our conflicts while they're happening. I'm asking you to stop sharing private details in a way that humiliates me. She looked at me like I'd insulted her. Humiliates you, please. Yes, I said. Humiliates me. Do you want me to use another word? Exposes me, undermines me, makes me feel like I'm dating your group chat. Her face hardened. Maybe you should ask yourself why my friends don't like you. That one was a punch. Not because I needed her friends to like me, but because of the cruelty behind it. The satisfaction, like she'd been waiting to say it. I stared at her. That's what this is now? Your friends don't like me, so I should just accept being disrespected? They don't like you because you're controlling, she said, like it was a fact, like it had been officially decided. You're always trying to set rules. You're always making me feel like I'm doing something wrong. It's exhausting. I felt something shift in my stomach, like a door closing. Do you hear what you're saying? I asked. You're not telling me what you think. You're telling me what the group thinks. You're repeating their verdict. She threw her hands up. Because they're right. And there it was, the moment the mask fully dropped. I took a step back like I needed physical space to process it. So that's it. If the group says I'm controlling, then I'm controlling. If the group says I'm insecure, then I'm insecure. If the group says you should leave me, then you should leave me. She didn't deny it. She didn't soften. She didn't even look conflicted. She just said, flatly, honestly? Yeah. I stood there, heart pounding, not from anger, but from disbelief. You're serious. She leaned forward, eyes sharp, and said the line that made the whole thing snap into place. This is who I am, she said. I talk to my friends. I share things. That's how I process. If you can't handle it, that's your problem. I stared at her for a long second. So you're not willing to change anything? She shrugged, like it was obvious. Why should I? My friends have been here longer than you. They'll be here after you. And that was the peak. That was the moment I felt the last bit of hope I'd been holding on to just drop out of my hands. Because at that point, it wasn't about tactics anymore. It wasn't about whether she understood my boundary. She understood it perfectly. She just didn't respect it. And worse, she didn't respect why it mattered. I could feel my voice getting quieter, not because I was losing, but because I was done. Okay, I said. She blinked, almost surprised. Okay, what? Okay, I repeated, calm. Then we're not compatible. Her expression changed, confusion first, then anger. Are you serious right now? I'm serious, I said. I'm not going to spend my life competing with your friends' opinions. I'm not going to be in a relationship where my dignity is up for debate every time you want validation. She scoffed. So you're breaking up with me because of my friends? I shook my head. No, I'm ending this because you don't protect the relationship, you outsource it. She stood up, voice rising. "You're unbelievable." I didn't match her volume. I didn't throw accusations. I didn't bring up every message I'd seen. I didn't try to win the final argument. I just looked at her and felt this strange clarity settle into me. Because right then, standing in my living room, watching her get angry that I wasn't submitting to the group verdict, I realized something that should have been obvious sooner. I wasn't talking to my partner. I was talking to the spokesperson. I didn't want a dramatic breakup. I didn't want to scorch the earth. I didn't want to expose her to anyone, screenshot her group chat, or send some petty message that made me feel powerful for 5 minutes and disgusting afterward. I wanted to leave clean, not because I was trying to be noble, because I knew that if I left messy, I'd stay emotionally tied to the mess. And I'd already spent enough time being pulled into a story I didn't consent to. So after that last conversation when she said, "This is who I am and my friends will be here after you," I did something that surprised even me. I stopped arguing entirely. I didn't try to prove that her friends didn't know me. I didn't try to defend myself against the labels. I didn't try to make her understand what she'd done. If she couldn't see it by now, she wasn't going to see it because of one more speech. I just nodded once, like the decision had already been made in my head days ago and my body was finally catching up. "I'm not doing this," I said. She scoffed. "You're so dramatic." I didn't take the bait. "No," I replied. "I'm done." "There's a difference." She stood there, arms crossed, waiting for me to say more, waiting for the long explanation she could pick apart, twist, screenshot, send to the group chat to get the right reaction. I didn't give her that. I walked into the bedroom and opened the closet. I grabbed a duffel bag, the same one I used for the gym. I didn't throw things. I didn't slam drawers. I just started packing the basics. Shirts, jeans, socks, moving slowly enough that I could keep my breathing steady. Behind me, I heard her footsteps. She followed me into the room, not to help, not to talk like an adult, but to challenge the reality that I was actually leaving. "You're really doing this," she said, like she was offended by my calm. I kept folding. "Yes. All because I talked to my friends." I zipped the side pocket and looked at her. "No, because you don't protect us." She rolled her eyes. "You're acting like I cheated." "In a way you did," I said. Not loudly, not as a jab, just honest. "You cheated the relationship out of privacy. You made it a group project. And you don't even think that's wrong." Her face hardened immediately. "There you go, playing victim." I let that pass like wind, because I wasn't trying to win her agreement anymore. I was trying to leave with my self-respect intact. I finished packing, stood up, and walked toward the living room. She followed, voice rising with each step. "So what? You're just going to run away?" she said. "You can't even handle a real relationship." I didn't respond. That silence drove her crazier than any argument ever had, because silence meant she couldn't redirect me. She couldn't turn it into a debate. She couldn't get me to perform. When we reached the front door, she moved in front of it like she could block the decision with her body. "Are you seriously leaving right now?" she demanded. I looked at her, still calm. "Yes." She shook her head like she couldn't believe it. Wow, so cold. And there it was, the accusation that always came when I stopped chasing. Cold, detached, like my refusal to beg was proof that I didn't care. For a second, I almost felt guilty, not because I was wrong, but because old versions of me would have rushed in to soften the moment, to reassure her, to make it easier for her. But then she picked up her phone, not even subtly, like muscle memory. Her thumb moved, and I watched her eyes drop to the screen, and I knew exactly what she was doing, either calling one of them or typing the first line of the story she was about to tell. The story where I was the villain. The story where she'd say, "You guys, he just walked out on me." And that was the final symbolic moment. So perfect it almost felt staged. She was about to reach for the audience again. I reached for my keys. I slipped them into my hand, felt the metal cool against my palm, and the truth came out of my mouth without anger and without pride. Just clarity. "You want to know why I seem cold?" I said. She looked up, irritated. "Why?" "Because I stopped competing for your loyalty," I told her. She stared at me, like she didn't know how to respond to a sentence that wasn't an invitation to argue. I continued, softer but firm. "I'm not leaving because you have friends. I'm leaving because every time it matters, you choose them over the relationship. You choose being validated over being fair. And I can't build a life with someone who treats respect like something optional, Her mouth opened, then closed, like she was searching for the right comeback. I didn't wait for it. I stepped around her, opened the door, and walked out. No dramatic slam, no final monologue. Just a quiet exit with a duffel bag in my hand and my heart pounding in that strange mix of grief and relief. In the hallway, I paused for half a second, not because I wanted to go back, but because I wanted to remember the feeling of choosing dignity over drama. Then I went downstairs and got into my car. I sat there with both hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead, breathing like I'd been holding my breath for weeks. My phone buzzed almost immediately. One text, then another. Then the rapid-fire notifications I recognized too well, the rhythm of the group chat machine starting up again, except now it was aimed at me. I didn't open them. I didn't respond. I started the car and drove. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to explain myself to a crowd. I was just protecting my peace. And that was the cleanest ending I could give myself. After I left, there were a few days where everything felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. Like my nervous system didn't know what to do without the constant pressure of being judged. And that's when the lesson actually settled in. Not as some dramatic I learned my worth speech, but as a set of simple truths I wish I'd understood earlier. Truths that apply to anyone, regardless of who's right in a specific fight. The first one is this: a relationship can't have a permanent audience. I'm not saying you can't ever talk to friends. I'm not saying every detail has to be locked away like it's classified, but there's a difference between having a support system and having a standing jury. When your partner is mentally performing for other people while they're talking to you, the relationship stops being two people building trust and starts being one person maintaining an image. And once the image matters more than the bond, you're not dealing with intimacy anymore. You're dealing with PR. The second truth is that support itself isn't the problem. The direction of that support is. It's normal to lean on friends. It's healthy to get perspective. It's even reasonable to vent sometimes when you're upset. The line gets crossed when support becomes an alliance against your partner. When the goal isn't clarity, it's backup. When the goal isn't understanding, it's winning. Because the moment you walk into a conflict trying to win, you're not trying to repair the relationship. You're trying to dominate it. And domination has nothing to do with love. The third truth surprised me when I saw it clearly. When a boundary gets called control, it's often because it removes someone's power. Not always. Sometimes control is real. Sometimes people do use boundaries as a cover for insecurity. But if your boundary is basic dignity, like, don't humiliate me, don't call an audience mid-argument, don't turn my private words into screenshots, and it still gets framed as control, that's a sign. A big one. It means the person isn't hearing, I need safety. They're hearing, I'm losing an advantage. And if someone needs an advantage over you to feel secure in the relationship, you're already in the wrong kind of relationship. The fourth truth is the one that people underestimate. Intimacy turned into entertainment is disrespect, even when it's disguised as just joking. If your partner shares your vulnerability for laughs, if they screenshot your private texts, mock your tone, exaggerate your flaws to get reactions, that's not harmless. It rewires the relationship. It teaches you that being honest is risky. It teaches you that opening up has consequences. And once you feel like you might be punished for being real, you stop being real. You start performing. You start hiding parts of yourself. You start shrinking. And a relationship where you're shrinking is not a relationship that's growing. The fifth truth is the one that freed me from the wrong fight. You don't need to beat your partner's friends. That's a trap. When you find yourself trying to compete with a group chat, trying to win over the friend who always has an opinion, trying to prove you're not the villain in someone else's story, you've already lost the point. Because the real issue isn't the friends. It's your partner putting you in competition with them in the first place. A healthy partner doesn't require you to win a popularity contest for basic respect. A healthy partner can have close friends and still protect the relationship's privacy. They can get support without turning you into a target. They can vent without humiliating you. They can disagree with you without recruiting a crowd to make you feel small. And if they can't, if they won't, then it's not your job to manage the friend group. It's your job to choose the right relationship. That's what I took from it. Not bitterness, not revenge, just clarity. Because I don't think she was evil. I don't think her friends were monsters. I think she had a coping mechanism that depended on external validation. And she didn't see how much damage it did. Because for her, it worked. It made her feel safe. It just made me feel exposed. And I learned something simple. Compatibility isn't just about chemistry. It's about how two people handle conflict, how they protect each other when they're upset, whether they treat dignity as a baseline or as a bargaining chip. Because love without dignity is just attachment, and attachment isn't enough. So if there's one line that summarizes the whole thing, the one I wish I'd heard before I wasted so much energy trying to argue my way into being respected, it's this: when someone puts you on emotional speakerphone, they're not looking for love. They're looking for consensus. So AITA for shutting the conversation down and setting a hard boundary? And where do you draw the line between venting to your friends and straight-up disrespect? Between getting support and turning your partner into group chat content? If you want more stories like this with updates and realistic endings, subscribe.